Hi, I'm Christy. I want to talk to you today about estate planning and specifically special needs trusts. Parents know that creating an estate plan is something that we all need to do. And we know that we need a will, we know we need guardians for our kids, but sometimes actually completing that can be a little tricky. Sometimes it even goes to another story and it kind of never gets done. Now, when you have a loved one with special needs, once again, the process gets more complicated. Now, in addition to having a will, you may even need to find a guardian for your adult loved one with special needs. And like I mentioned, you might need to think about a special needs trust. Once again, things just got a little more complicated and a lot more overwhelming. Now let me pause here and say, I am not a lawyer. I have no legal background. This information is all from links and research that I found. You can find those links over on my blog at www.havenofhopeforme.com. This originally posted in December of 2018. I do highly recommend that you consult an attorney to assist you with your specific situation. Now, in our case, we've thought about creating a special needs trust, and it's been on our to-do list for quite a while. But life has gotten overwhelming and it hasn't quite happened yet. Now we have an adult, and we're really starting to think about, well, what happens and how do we provide for him if something happens to us? Especially if he's living apart from us. What do we do then? Suddenly, this just got a little bit more important, which is part of the reason that I've added it to this transition process. This is keeping it on my radar, and I'm really hoping to get this done within the next couple of months. Now you're probably going, so what in the world is a special needs trust? Well, one of the links that I found is from nolo.com. It says, quote, if you want to leave money or property to a loved one with a disability, you must plan carefully. Otherwise, you could jeopardize your loved one's ability to receive Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, and Medicaid benefits. By setting up a special needs trust in your will, you can avoid some of these problems, end quote. Or J.R. Lawson says it this way, quote, parents with child that have special needs must take care to plan their estates so that other public assistance that would be available to the child is not jeopardized, end quote. This would also apply to adults. Okay, so reading those quotes, it seems a little bit scary. After I've done all of this work to get these supports and services lined up, I definitely don't want to do anything to jeopardize them. Now, nolo.com goes on to say, quote, a way around losing eligibility for SSI or Medicaid is to create what is called a special needs or supplemental needs trust. Then, instead of leaving property directly to your loved one, you leave it to the special needs trust, end quote. And then that means that you have a trustee that can purchase items and then give the items to your loved one. Now, the article does go into a bit more detail about what all this means. But as I'm reading this, I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense and it seems pretty reasonable. So as I've gone through all of this research, I've discovered that there are a number of different kinds of trusts that may be options for you. Something you need to know, and I brought it up in one of the quotes, a special needs trust is also known as a supplemental needs trust. They are the same thing. Some of the different options include pooled trusts. This is when you have a company that manages the trust and they pool the money from multiple families into one fund. Now, each beneficiary has its own account to keep the money straight. These are available in many states. Nolo.com briefly mentions them in the article, and it links to another article. Again, I've got links on my blog. I also found a website that gives options for pooled trusts by state. Now, I don't know that this is a comprehensive list, but hopefully it gives you an idea and a place to start. Another type is called a support trust. J.R. Lawson says this, quote, a support trust allows the trustee to make distributions for various needs such as clothing, shelter, food, education, and medical needs. Typically, benefits from Supplemental Security Income, or SSI, and Medicaid will not be available to beneficiaries of support trusts, end quote. So that would be something to think about. Another type of trust is called a third-party special needs trust. Now, this is when you plan for a special needs trust inside your estate planning, and it becomes a specific part of your will or your living trust. Now, there are very specific requirements that are used for this to be effective, and this is one of the reasons that I recommend using a lawyer. Again, the article from J.R. Lawson does briefly talk about this. The final type is called a self-settled special needs trust, or it's also called a first-party special needs trust. This is, quote, when someone receives a personal injury settlement and requires long-term care, end quote. That's a quote from J.R. Lawson. So there's so much more that could be said about this. I'm barely scratching the surface. But here's a few thoughts that might help you out. First of all, I highly, highly, highly recommend talking to a lawyer for yourself. This is such a complicated issue and there are so many nuances. I think this is one of the cases where it's best to talk specifically to your lawyer. Now, NOLO.com does say that you can do it on your own. And technically that may be true. But like I said, it's so complicated, I'm not comfortable doing that. I know I'm talking to a lawyer, and that's a big part of the reason I'm recommending that to you as well. Now, requirements and laws will vary by state, which is, again, why I really recommend that you see a lawyer, and that way you can make sure that what you're planning is appropriate and applicable to your specific area. You might also think about talking to other parents or caregivers and see what they've chosen to do in this area. Now, this might not give you the best or the most accurate information, but it will help you know what others have decided and why they decided it. Now, that can help you make a more informed decision. Now, I was referred to a specific estate planning lawyer from AJ's teacher. And I have a link on the blog on where you can find different lawyers in your area. Now, worst case scenario, you can't find any leads. What do? Just like anything else, you go Google it. That's how I found a lot of this, in fact, most of this information for this video. And I also was able to find several lists that had estate planning lawyers in my area. Now, I'd also recommend not only do you use a lawyer, but you use somebody who's experienced specifically in special needs trusts, not just in estate planning. Again, there's so many nuances with this. I think that it is important in this area. So my question for you this week is this. Have you thought about this? Have you addressed it? If so, what decision did you make? Is there something I've forgotten? This is something that still kind of overwhelms me, so I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. You can leave me a comment below, or once again, you can leave me a comment over on my blog at www.havenofhopeforme.com. This posted in December of 2018. I'd appreciate it if you would share this with anybody that you think would find it helpful. I'd love to help as many families as I possibly can. Over on my website, you can sign up for my email list. This will make sure that you find out about all the pieces to the process in this transition process, as well as new content as it's released. I strive to only send things that I think you'll find helpful, informational, and useful. I'm so relieved to have a little bit of guidance in this area, and a plan is forming in my brain, and I'm remembering, as I always say, that life is good, and there is never a dull moment.